For a lot of veterans and service members, one of the big early questions when they're thinking about using their VA loan benefit is, do I qualify for a VA loan? The answer, while it's not complicated or complex, winds up being twofold because at its heart, it's really two different questions a lot of times that people are asking. One is about eligibility for this hard-earned benefit that's been helping veterans for more than 80 years. The other is about their ability to use that benefit to qualify for a mortgage and go on to buy a home with it. And so if we're talking about your ability to have credit, income, and debt level, showing lenders that you have an ability to repay a loan, that's a track that we will save for other videos. This is really going to focus just on the question of eligibility, of being eligible for this benefit that most people in America cannot use because they did not raise their hand to serve our country. And so when it comes to VA loan eligibility, there are a few different things to know and to keep in mind. Generally, VA is going to be looking at two things in terms of whether or not someone checks the boxes and has access to this benefit. It's really about your time in service and the nature, character of your discharge. And so when it comes to time in service, generally speaking, there are a handful of big markers or bullet points that cover most situations. 90 consecutive days of service on active duty during wartime, 181 consecutive days during peacetime, 6 years in the Guard or Reserve. And because of recent legislation that's really helped to expand access to homeownership for Guard and Reserve, there are situations now where if you're serving on Title 32 orders, you might have eligibility much sooner. It really depends on how long you served and how many of those days were consecutive. And then the last big bullet point is surviving spouses actually have eligibility for this benefit in some cases. And so those 4 bullet points are good general guides for eligibility for the benefit, but there are so many one-off situations that aren't covered in those 4 main headers where a veteran might not check any of those boxes but still ultimately be eligible for the benefit. That's why at the end of the day, it's really easiest to talk with a VA lender, especially one that knows the benefit, has access to the VA's automated portal, and can really help veterans better dig into and assess their eligibility situation. Now, to be sure, if you're a veteran, before you can close on a loan, a VA loan, you're going to need a couple different things. And one of them is the ability to repay credit, income, and debts and all of that. But another thing you will need before you can close on a VA loan is a formal attestation from the government that you're eligible for the benefit. And that typically comes in the form of a piece of paper. It's known as the Certificate of Eligibility, or COE. Now, you, veteran and servicemen around in the world, you can get your COE on your own, going directly through the e-benefits portal, working with the VA directly. You can also typically get it from a lender, usually in seconds, because of an automated portal that the VA offers. Anything with eligibility, just know that broad bullet points only take you so far, and a lot of times those unique cases are going to require deeper digging, some documentation. A lot of times with Guard and Reserve members, right, you're thinking about specific forms and point statements, but there are so many things that can crop up for those unique one-off cases when it comes to eligibility that it's typically best, especially if you're not sure, to talk with a lender. In any case, you don't need to know that you're eligible for a VA loan. You definitely don't need to have that COE document in hand to start this process. More than anything, it's really about just knowing that you served our country, and that means you might, and in many cases probably do, have access to this benefit that's been changing lives for more than 8 decades now. Find someone you trust, a lender who knows the benefit, who can help take you through this. They can usually, after a quick phone call, have a really good understanding of your likelihood of eligibility. They can never tell you for sure because that okay has to come from the VA. But especially a lot of lenders who've worked with the VA loan for a long time, they'll have a really good understanding once you take them through your service history and the nature of your discharge. Don't let the lack of a COE, don't let the lack of certainty about eligibility keep you from at least starting the process and investigating, because again, at the end of the day, knowing that you have this benefit, ultimately determining that you're eligible, helps you get in a stronger financial position when it comes to home buying. And it's not just because you're going to use a VA loan, but because you know that you could use a VA loan. And then you can weigh that against conventional and FHA and other options that might make sense for you. Have somebody you trust run the numbers, and then look at everything in black and white and have a much better footing and a stronger understanding, and be ready to make that decision that's best for you and your financial future. So really at a high level, when you're thinking about eligibility and qualification for a VA loan, you're really talking about two different things. One is eligibility for the benefit, the other is the ability to actually close on a mortgage loan. Just know you don't really need to know either in all reality. You just need to know that you served, and be ready to talk about your service history, your financial goals, and what you want to do moving forward with someone you trust.